to that.
Okay.
Where did you um, get your first impressions about the idea of retirement when you were younger? How did, was that a thing in your?
I, you know what? I think it was sort of a thing with the generation that was our parents. And they worked a 9 to 5 basically with some variations. And then it was I reach such and such a point and I should have a nest egg enough so that I don't have to work anymore. And then I'm going to do who knows what. But I'll figure that out when I get there. But meanwhile, I'm going to work hard. And they did. I mean, that generation worked really hard. And I'm grateful for the gifts that they gave us in terms of I work really hard, partly because of that generation working as hard as they did.
Mhm, mhm.
So both my mom and my dad and my grandma and grandpa, they were hard workers.
And did they end up being able to enjoy any kind of retirement, like X number of years?
They did some. My grandmother did. My mom, she had such major health issues, although she had a number of years where she was retired. Same with my dad. So yeah, they did. And then health got them. But they were both older. My dad was 91. My mom was 92
Mhm,
when they passed.
mhm.
My grandparents were both 94. So I've
Right.
got some longevity in my family. So
Well, just while we're on that topic, how old are you right now?
I'll be 70 in about a month.
Okay, so you're still a young man. Good to hear.
Ah, just a kid. My dad's oldest sister turned 104 at the end of December.
Well, that's a record for somebody
Oh, no
in some
kidding.
group.
She said they treat me really well in airports.
Is she still going through airports?
Uh-huh. When
Okay.
she does, she says they take really good care of me. I guess they don't want her to break or something, but she
Oh
loves
yeah,
it.
that would
She
be
thinks it's
bad.
the best.
Okay, so when you before you just review a little bit for us your sort of your work history, where you were going and where you ended up being, and just in order to just as a job, what were you doing?
Yeah. So I've never had a career. It was mostly doing the work that was in front of me, taking the opportunity if it showed up, all of that. So I did so many things in so many arenas, from construction to insurance to radio disc jockey to, I mean, it is so all over the map. Shipping and receiving, hotel night clerk, working in a um, food processing hotline, a motorcycle fairing manufacturer,
Wait, what's a fairing? F-A-R-I-N-G. What is it?
Ferring, and it's the body part of a motorcycle that houses all the
Oh, okay.
instrumentation and things like that.
All right.
So, you know, that was one of my jobs. And working for a church for a couple years in my 20s. And I was a vice president of operations for a property management company. I owned my own insurance agency for like 15 years. And now I write and speak. So,
We're most of us are aware of that. Okay, so let me cut in here. Of those, let's call them odd jobs. 15 years is not an odd job. Which one of those sort of tasks or things you're involved in, do you look back and go like, uh, that wasn't that bad. That was kind of fun.
oh, radio rock and roll disc jockey.
Where did you
Yeah.
do that? Wait.
Oh,
Where did you
so
do it?
so I just graduated high school, was looking for some work, and I didn't know what to do. And I walk into a radio station and I said, I'm looking for a job. What do you want to do? I want to be a disc jockey. Like I'm 17 years old, right? They said, have you ever done this before? I said, no, but I acted in a drama group, in high school. And they said, a drama group, drama. Um, and I said, yeah. They said, well, it turns out that as of last night, we have a situation. I said, really? What does that mean? They said, well, we had really good disc jockey, our best, in fact, and he forgot and left his mic open and he was dealing dope over the air. And and we had to fire him, but we have nobody to replace him. Now, this was a Canadian Broadcasting Company affiliate station. So, you had your middle of the road morning, country western afternoon, rock and roll at night, and in between you had feeds, from CBC. And so it was CFTK, CKTK radio up in Terrace, British Columbia, which is a small town, but it had more land area reach than pretty much any radio station in the country. And because it went all up into the Northwest Territories and, into Alaska and stuff like that. And so they gave me 6 hours of training. And this is back when you spun the wheel, you set it up. Yeah, you had to cassette tapes. You had to do your own news, weather, and sports coming off the teletype. All of this. I wish I had my first 24 hours of work because it must have just been hilarious and a disaster because, it says 12 seconds intro. You have 12 seconds to state who is singing and whatever. And I'd forget. So I'm literally trying to track the
The
disc
record.
around in circles and getting dizzy trying to remember. And by the time I figure it out, they're well into the song, and I still think that I have to tell who it is. Anyway, by the end of summer, I was doing 45 air hours a week,
Wow.
which was
Wow.
huge. So then I go to college in Saskatchewan, and I'm a missionary kid at a Bible school. I end up being 6 to midnight rock and roll on CK radio, which is one of the largest in the province of Saskatchewan. And during winter break, I would do CGIB in Vernon, British Columbia. So it was it was a wild experience all the way around.
Was it
And
controversial for you to be in Bible school and be doing rock and roll
yeah,
DJing?
yeah, a little bit. But I'm
Okay.
a missionary kid, and in
Right.
our denomination, missions is sort of at the top of the totem pole,
Right.
at the bottom. Sorry,
Yeah.
totem pole is built from the base up, and you want to be at the bottom because that's the most important. And yeah, they kind of gave me a pass, kind of
All
for a
right.
while.
So
And
when you were working, I'm going to say I'll break here. Okay, so my internet connection is a little sluggish sometimes. If you see that, just keep talking like
oh, I
normal.
will. I've already seen it.
Okay, we're back. So when you were working, as sort of have family and so on, did you and you were in the insurance business 15 years, you must have anticipated the idea of retiring or having money to retire and all of that. Was that ever in your imagination? No?
No, because I was still pretty young, and it just, it's one of those things you push off and don't think about, And
Okay.
I grew up thinking I'd die by the time I was 30 years old because I was going to be some great, you know, mission purpose person for
Oh,
God, and I had a death wish. So suicidal ideation had had accompanied me from my childhood, and because of the trauma and stuff.
sure.
But no, I was running so hard. Plus, and this is really interesting. There was when I started insurance about 5 years into it, I thought, you know, there's got to be a better way to do this because I'm watching all these young men and women pay a lot of money to get trained, and then they crash and burn within the first, 12 months. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I heard about IDAC, which was this company started by John Bradley, who is a psychologist. Fascinating. You go through it, and what they're trying to do is figure out your values, your core personality elements, and skills, and things like that. But they have a whole series of uh, computerized behavioral testing on the one side, and then you have a psychologist who works with you on the other side, and they don't talk to each other. So they're both developing their profiles independent of each other. And then they all come together with someone who knows you really well at a meeting and lay it all out. they had done most of the riffing in the state of Oregon, those who had been let go from jobs. And IDAC would actually, if you wanted, they would follow you right into a career path that was designed for you. I mean, it's just tailor-made. And three major things happened to me. And I went to see if this would work for new people coming into the business. Remember, it was 5 years into this. And so they run me through this whole gamut of behavioral analysis and testing and all, Myers-Briggs and you name it. We did it. And then John Bradley was my therapist guide. And and then when we all came together, Kim, who I'm married to, was the person who knew me the best. So we come together and they said, well, um, the only reason that you're doing insurance is because it meets one of your five core values, and that is to support your family. Otherwise, there is absolutely no reason that you should be doing this. And but I'm fighting the fear of financial insecurity demon, right? So
Yeah.
I'm pedaling as fast as I can. And fear was greater than four of my core values.
Exactly.
So, so the
Well, a
second
lot of
thing
us work.
the second thing they said, and this is in my late 20s, they said, you are actually very intelligent and very creative. And that was the first time I believed it
Yeah.
because it had been done as a double blind. And
Yeah.
I always just thought I fooled people. That's was my survival skill is that, I was a really good liar because it was my survival skill
Hmm.
growing
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
And that was a stunner for me. So that's the third thing, actually, there's four. The third thing they said, you have a personality complex in terms of how you're wired that uh, is so rare in the thousands and thousands of people we've put through our system. We've only found one other person. And in fact, I talked to John not long ago, and he said they don't even test for it now. It's so rare. And what it is that I am equally an introvert and an extrovert communicator. So, so even though if you see me speak and stuff, you would
Mm-hmm.
think that I'm an extrovert. I mean,
Hmm.
in terms of communication, I have an extrovert communication style, but I'm actually an introvert.
Hmm.
And like you said, we don't we don't even test for that anymore. The fourth thing is you're only good for 5 years at anything. And at the end of 5 years, you'll either want to rechange or change the whole system, or you'll go find something different. So there's something about the way I'm wired. The thing about writing and speaking is it's changing all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So I really like that. And they said, okay, for example, you could be the president of a very large university, as long as you had nothing to do with the money. So, so that's a frame of reference in how I'm wired.
Yep.
And so when I was growing up doing these jobs, insurance and stuff, I made it 15 years, and and then I bailed for something else. That's when I become this vice president of operations for a property management company, and I gave my family my word that I'd make it at least 2 years, and I made it 2 years, 4 months, and even then I quit four times, and I don't quit jobs.
Hmm.
And what I found out was that the way that I quit, because they had to hire two full-time people to replace me when I left, and the pressure, um, I don't even know how to describe. Anyway, uh, my boss was a narcissist and a manipulator and so many other things. So I quit four times, and the fourth time, three times. and the man came begging on hands and knees, basic, or even with tears in his eyes. And I caved 3 times. And the fourth time I didn't cave. And he just got so furious. But the problem was, and I finally figured it out because I'd watched him do this to other people and I watched the way they quit. And they all cussed him out and screamed and all of this stuff. I never did that. And so he lost
Yeah.
because I didn't do that. He lost. And and so after that I went looking for any kind of work that I could find. And that's what I
So
did for a number of years.
so um, not this is applicable exactly in your context, but being 70, do you think about retiring or stopping something? How do you think about all of that?
I don't think about it at all
Yeah.
because I'm so consumes the wrong word because it has a connotation of being eaten by something. I am so joyful, grateful, comfortable, um, empowered, uh,
Mm-hmm.
energized is better
Mm-hmm.
about what's actually in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so uninterested in how this is all going to play out. And I'm just not sort of a purpose-driven person. And if you take retirement as a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden everything that is in front of you becomes an impediment. And I just don't think about it that way.
Um, Tell me um, you said things that are coming up, just briefly, if you could highlight some of the things, we know what you've done, what's coming up.
Yeah. So, and again, I hold all of these things loosely.
Understand?
I don't hold my identity connected to them any more than I ever did the shack. And but there's potential for 2 movies based on Eve and Crossroads. I have just delivered to the publisher a, a complete draft of the sequel for The Shack.
Mhm,
I'm working on writing a libretto with Janet Shvatal, who's an American soprano,
mhm,
for a large play musical. So it's not just a musical; it's a
mhm.
play, dialogue, and for the Shack, we're working from a baseline in Germany, and uh, and a lot of little side things, other book projects. I've got a Nicholas, one of my boys, and I, we have this little podcast that's sort of an unpodcast. I mean, it's twice a week, 15-ish to 20-ish minutes twice a week with no
Mhm,
theme, no sponsors. Once in a while, I interview somebody who's got great stories or
mhm.
whatever. And it's so it's so fun, and it's turned out to be something that is important, and especially for those who are picking it up. It's called Paul Young Podcast.
Oh yeah, great title.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the sequel, so if people are
yeah,
interested in the Paul, it's called the Paul Young Podcast. It's everywhere. Podcasts can be downloaded
yeah.
now.
You can look up
Then,
paulyoungpodcast.com.
and then the sequel, when do you expect the book to be
That's
out?
a great question because I'm right now on the cusp of beginning those kinds of conversations with a publisher.
Yeah.
There is some consideration. We'll see if it happens. So if you see the book before October of 2026, then you'll know that what I'm about to tell you didn't happen. But one one of the conversations is that um, uh, Frankfurt in Germany has, I think, the largest book fair in the world, um, and the publisher may want to go. This is the conversation. May want to go. This from their side. I didn't even think of this and sell all the international and other language rights this summer at the Frankfurt Book Fair, and then give them time to translate, get their cover stuff the way they want it, and then do a singular global release in October of 2026, which would be like, how cool is that?
Really cool.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Um, okay, so you are 70 years old as of this recording.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think about aging? Now, you can include the physical part of it if you want to, and whatever you
Sure,
like to tell us about that. But also the idea like of relevance. We've talked about that at times.
sure.
How do you, I use the word struggle. I'm not thinking you're struggling with it, but how do you feel about that, if at all? Those kind of things. I'm interested in those.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about relevance first. To me, it's a chimera, a chimera, a chimera. It's
Chimera,
a,
chimera.
um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a mirage.
yeah.
You know, it's like who the crap figures out what's relevant and what's not? Because relevance always has to do with this very specific time, place, and period and era and all that. And I look at Gandhi or Martin Luther King. I don't think that they were trying to be relevant. I think that they were responding to the world as it was in front of them, and whether they were relevant or not was up to anybody that was looking on. So I don't think at all about relevance. I don't try to write for relevance because I think as soon as you do that, you create a set of expectations for yourself and it just crushes the art. And if I was specifically writing for a specific nonfiction purpose, it could be relevant to certain communities or whatever the
Yeah,
topic was. And I
yeah.
get that. But in a general sense of, oh, I want to be important, I think that kind of an idle relevance will destroy a lot of the relationships in your life.
Don't you think though that a lot of people that are enjoying relevance are unaware of it until it's gone?
Yeah, and then they have to decide how important it was,
Right,
and whether their identity was linked to it.
right.
You know, if
Yeah.
if what I write is relevant to somebody, that's a kiss of grace, man. That's a
Hmm.
that's just a sweetness. And but I don't have the kind of mind, I don't know if anybody does, that can understand the global situation in a way that they could figure out what relevance actually means.
Hmm.
And like you said, I think it's true that people who have been relevant at a certain time, a certain era, they didn't care about relevance. They were driven by something else, love, compassion,
Hmm.
grief,
Hmm.
something that was maybe relevant to them.
How do you feel about the whole idea of aging relative to your body, to your physical health, energy, all of that?
Well, some days it's a bitch. And it's a challenge and it's a curiosity and it's a learning curve. You cannot do the things you could. I did a lot of athletics growing up. I'm not
Wow.
very big, but I did a lot of
Like
athletics.
such
And
as what? Such as,
up in Canada, badminton is a very big deal, and I was really good at it. But
do
I
you say badminton?
badminton,
Bag,
badminton, badminton.
badminton. Have you seen the
Bad,
Chinese players play badminton?
yeah.
They're frightening, man. Anyway, go on.
Oh, you know what? And when you watch it, like on the Olympics and stuff, you have no idea how hard that is. And if you're there, you begin to realize it's the third farthest running sport in the world.
Wow.
And because one thing, tennis, at least the ball bounces, so you have time to get there. But in badminton, you don't. I mean,
Yeah.
that thing is barely over the edge of the net, and the next one's back in the far left corner. And it's crazy what some of the Asian world in terms of their professionals have done with racket sports. I
At
love racket.
ping pong, unbelievable.
Yeah,
Stand back 20 feet and go.
yeah. So,
Okay.
I
Anyway,
played, yeah, I played flag football. I played volleyball. I was a libero in volleyball. I coached all kinds of things. I coached my kids in some sport, every one of them.
wow.
And it was great. I came down to Oregon, to Portland, at one of the community colleges. We're having this huge badminton weekend competition, and I just cleaned house because they didn't have anything that was comparable to what
Right. Right.
training was up in Canada. I never, well, I can't say never. I played a little bit of ice hockey, just enough to know that I didn't want to because everything was too hard. I played some rugby. I was a
Wow.
hooker. I was a hooker.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Okay. Don't know what
yeah,
that means, but I'm happy for you.
it's a
Oh,
position in rugby. And if you're a good rugby team, you'll go through two or three hookers in a season.
yeah.
And, So, it makes for good laughs, um, but I did some of that. I did soccer quite a bit.
Yep.
And so I played a lot. And my memory is of what I was able to do. And if I try to do it now, I'm like 10 feet behind where I think I sh was getting. And it's so there's this slowing down, beginning to be kinder to yourself, kinder recognizing your body, but still wanting to do some things that keep yourself in reasonable health and shape. That
Do
becomes more important.
do you have any physical things you do now or?
Yeah, I want to get into pickleball because
Mhm,
I played it a couple times and it's a good racket sport. And
mhm,
a lot of the same
mhm,
theory goes into
mhm,
pickleball as it does to badminton. And then, but I have a little app on my phone, and every
yeah.
morning I get up and, you
Okay.
know, uh, follow this elder guy who's doing these
Of
exercises.
course. Okay.
But I'm also looking at how my diet influences my life.
Uh-huh.
So, because I started having these really intense, it wasn't arthritis, but it was inflammation, joints and muscles.
Right.
And
Right.
so right now I'm on this anti-inflammation diet.
Yeah.
It's, but
Yeah.
it's already helped in other areas other
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
the inflammation. We're trying to figure out, okay, where are my food sensitivities here? And
How about,
then
go ahead.
four
Yeah.
years ago, up pops this extraordinary experience that I didn't know what to do with. And then it was gone after a few days. And then it pops up again. And then it pops up again. And it turns out that I have left frontal lobe focal point epilepsy.
Mm.
I don't have any in my family history. My doctors think it's from being almost killed by a 17-year-old high-risk driver when I was in my
Um,
20s, early
mhm,
20s.
mhm.
And I was a pedestrian. He knocked me a couple houses down the street, and there's a whole story about that.
Right.
But you look back at you know, obviously God doesn't hit people on the streets, right? So it was a
Yeah.
17-year-old high-risk driver. But out of that um, came my marriage to Kim,
Hmm.
you
Right.
know, really embedded in that whole set of circumstances. So,
Mhm.
you know, there's a weaver who is working things together in ways
And
for each.
what are the effects of what is this called? Uh,
It's epilepsy. It's a left frontal lobe
what,
focal point epilepsy. It's the
how does it?
same epilepsy that Dostoevsky had. And I didn't know it. I didn't know it until 2 weeks after my diagnosis. And I'm looking for a quote by Dostoevsky. And I find this letter that he wrote to his doctor in like 1867, talking about how this left frontal lobe focal point epilepsy was going to kill him because they didn't have anti-seizure meds.
Mm,
And and I'm like, for real? And then I realized that his book, The Idiot, Prince Mishkin has left frontal lobe focal point epilepsy, and that's why he's called the idiot because he ends up in grand mal seizures. So I didn't end up in a grand mal seizure because we caught it in time, but I was sure heading there. And it's taken 3 years at this point to get to the place where most of the seizures, well, the impact with about them is less. Um, some of the not euphoric, but some of the incredible elements of this kind of seizure are pretty cool. I mean, they are, and that's been muted by the
right.
by the drug protocol. But I'd rather have it muted than have grand mal seizures.
How is this impacting you now?
Okay. Well, I probably average one a week.
Mm,
And it depends on how hard it hits me because it can lay me out for a day or a day and a half or only for a 4 hour nap, right?
mhm,
Um, it is in my left frontal
mhm,
lobe. I'm right-handed, so that's
mhm,
the area where my data center is.
mhm,
Things that are hardcore data, um,
mhm.
I really struggle with, like people's names.
Yeah.
It'll it'll eventually come back to me, but it's like my Rolodex got shattered somewhere in there, and I'm
Mhm,
picking through all the pieces trying to figure out. And this is good friends, my grandkids sometimes. I pause. I have to, okay. And I know who you are. I know how we're connected.
Right.
I mean, I don't remember all the stories
Right.
that we share,
Right.
but interesting is that on the other side, when I am working on creative work or I'm working on theoretical work like or theological work, I don't have a problem. That stuff's not a problem. And I can track that stuff. I can keep it in place. Um, and I think because the way I approach those kinds of subjects is very creative anyway. So
Mhm.
it fits into the right side of the brain.
Mhm.
But and what you do is you learn to ask for help. I don't have any problem looking for a word and stopping and saying, "Okay, guys, you got to help me here. It's a word that means this. It's kind of like,
Wait, you do this in public?
oh yeah,
Good. That's nice.
yeah, because because it's real life. I just don't understand hiding stuff anymore.
Mhm.
I understand hiding stuff when I was younger because everybody was an enemy and nobody was trustworthy. And but I'm enough comfortable in my own skin where I don't keep any secrets.
Mhm.
And we really, if we think about it, we don't need to try to relate to job titles or positions. We want to see real human beings. That's what we want.
Mhm. Mhm.
And notoriety and platform, all that kind of stuff can really create an impediment
Mhm.
because suddenly the imagination, the persona of who people think you are
Mhm.
is something that you're actually not, and you tend to hide inside the persona because you don't know what else to do. And you're afraid that being human will shatter the persona in such a way that you'll lose your income or,
Right.
whatever the fears are.
So asking for help, remembering a word in a public setting is a way of signaling, hey, I'm human.
Yeah. And you know what's been beautiful about that is that people who had put me sort of on a pedestal because of the Shack and the
Mhm.
movie and all this other stuff, it knocked me off of it in the most beautiful way.
Mhm.
Suddenly I had an in to people who are really suffering. I mean,
Mhm.
really suffering.
Mhm.
And they recognized in me the limitations that they also experience often in very much greater ways than
Mhm.
I do.
Mhm.
And so yeah, and I have my friends like Bradley Jerzak who if we're on a Zoom panel discussion or something, he's always watching for me.
Mhm.
And he'll see it when it happens.
Mhm.
And when he sees it, he'll go, Paul, do you think it might be a good time to just go get a nap? I got this. And he's done that a couple, three times for me.
Mhm.
And if in a conference, I don't have any problem saying, all right, this is what's going on. I've totally
Mhm.
lost my track here.
Mhm.
And so can somebody help me in terms of what I was even talking about?
Exactly.
But when I have these seizures, I can do one thing.
Yeah.
I can focus on one thing. And oh, funny story. My seizures are more connected to sound than they are to light. A lot of people, it's
Mhm.
lights that flash and things like that.
Mhm.
But mine is chaotic sound or really like in a restaurant, if they've got loud
Mhm.
music and they've got this booming bass line
Mhm.
that throbs through, that's hard for me. And
Mhm.
so if the sound is more level,
Mhm.
a crowd of people is fine.
Mhm.
But things like a rodeo, not so good. And so I went to this rodeo, and one of my grandkids, I think it was one of the grandkids said, or one of my kids said, Dad, I think it's one of the girls, why don't you use earbuds and just tune it to your phone and put your phone on white noise?
Mhm.
I'm like, that's a great idea. And it worked like a charm. So I'm sitting in the rodeo stand right when the first time I ever tried to do this. Now, those of you who ever wear earbuds in public, you know that when you speak, you speak way louder than you think you do because you're trying to overcome whatever the
Right.
sound is you're hearing. So I'm there and I'm thinking about something and I look up and nobody's moving. And I say a lot louder than I intended to, how come everybody's quiet? Is somebody praying or something? And that's exactly what they were doing. So like 5 rows of people around me all try not to just burst out laughing. And like this old guy, he's just
So
he's
do you
yeah.
do you find your kids uh uh taking care of you or being concerned, or you're into that kind of a space now?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You know, all of these sorts of things. And some of it is so incredibly tender. One of my grandkids wrote a little note, sent it to me. 50 things I would like to say, but can't or won't to my parents. Right? This is one of my grandkids. And one of them was, I want to be able to go to grandma and grandpa's house because I'm scared that grandpa's going to die.
No. They wrote that?
Hmm.
Wow.
And you go,
That's rough.
oh man. I went to a incredible funeral. It's in my top 3 funerals of all time. And funerals I like better than weddings, frankly. There's more certainty. And so I go there, and it's my friend Joanne, and she's putting to rest her second husband. He's 91 and she's 87. And she's a hospice chaplain. He was the head of education for Portland State University, education department. And it was the first funeral I've been since a lot of the ways my body has been changing happened. And my mortality was right there because, and she was so incredibly, she's a lively person. She is, I mean, it's one of those that nobody knows when she'll run out of gas, but it's only the moment that she'll pass. You know, she is just active and amazing. And she brought humanity to her story in such a fantastic way that it didn't allow you
Mm,
the the ability to separate yourself because of, well, next is this in the chain of order of the
mm,
service and all this kind of stuff. She just busted it.
mm,
And and that said, you know, you're not too far away from this,
mhm.
and it really made the moment in my life even more precious than I had been considering it. And it also really reinforced my commitment to learning how to stay only in the present moment, moment by moment, and live that way, moment by moment by moment.
Paul, if you don't mind me asking, uh, uh, what is it about this memory or moment or idea that evokes emotions in you?
Oh, my grandson,
About your
or about
grandson,
yesterday.
about the the
You know.
the funeral, the thing you attended, that
Oh,
something was touching you about
oh,
that. Yeah.
she had a little video, and she told the story of how she met Ron and the combination of the two things. And in this video, Ron was at the place and he was, in hospice. He couldn't walk or stand. And they had gone over the last number of years, they'd gone to 26 different cruises to dance, to dance. And I mean, she when she married him, didn't know that he loved to dance, and he loves to dance, and she loves to dance. So they'd go there, and she said, those couples that are at every one of these dance floors on a cruise they're just perfect. They're just dressed to the nines and all this stuff. She said that wasn't us. But their favorite song was Elvira.
Mm.
Elvira,
Uh,
that.
uh,
And in the funeral notes was Elvira, all right there, and
Beautiful.
so she this will give you a little background about her. When she's held like she's been in hospice, a chaplain for years, and then she started these grief classes. And Ron was encouraged to go to her grief class because his wife had passed away, and he was struggling a bit a number of months later. And so he goes, and then he's an education person, so he would come early and ask questions, right? And they became friendly. So over a number of months, and then uh, she calls him up one day, says, "Hey, I'm coming out to this town and where he lives, and says, I'm meeting a patient out there, but any chance I can come look at your Christmas tree farm?" And he says, "Sure." So he loves cars. He loves things like that. He's got a red pickup truck and drives her around. And oh, he says, "I'll go. We'll go if we can have lunch first." So they have lunch and then they go drive around. And this is Joanne. So I've heard that you have started dating again. And I would like to know if it's okay for me to put my name in the hat. And a few days later, she's telling this whole story at the funeral, right?
Well,
A few days later, he calls her and says, "Were you serious about?" And she said, "Yeah, but you need to know some things. One is I am not going to get serious about any man who doesn't have a relationship with Jesus because I do, and it's important to me." And he says, "Well, I don't know a lot about Jesus. I know some about God, but if you'll teach me." So she does. And over the course of months, and at one point he says, "Okay, so ask me the question. Well, Ron, do you believe that Jesus is God in the flesh who has taken everything that is about you into onto the cross and 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 is healing everything in your life?" And he goes, "I do." He says, "Well, then you need to be baptized." So right there, she baptizes him in the sauna. I mean, in the hot tub. I mean, that's Joanne. So she plays this clip of when he can't stand up, but they they were using hands, and he would turn her around, and he would be singing Elvira, and
um,
and then the the kiss at the end. And this is just, days before he passes.
wow.
And the thing that got me then, here's the thing that got me. And she says, every night we would pray together. Every night. That was in our marriage. And it got to the place where he could not speak anymore. He just couldn't speak. And and I'd pray. And the fourth of those nights where he couldn't speak anymore, I'd start to pray. And he squeezed my hand, and he was trying to communicate to me how much this meant to him and how much their love meant to us, and and to him, and the strength of the love. And she said, this fourth night, I knew this was the last time that I would be praying with him. And she said our tradition was at the end of our prayer time, we would sing, "Amen, that." And she said, I got only through part of the first amen, and I couldn't go on. And she said, I just collapsed on his shoulder, and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And then he passed, and she said, I never got to finish my amen. So would you all help me get some closure? And we all
Yeah.
sang amen. And women all over the auditorium, and a few men, including me, stood up
Yeah.
as we sang the amen. So I think it touched me for a lot of reasons. One is because I love her,
Yeah.
known her for longer than Kim and I have been married, which is 45 years. And but She was able to bring into the moment the magnificence of what it means to be human and the gifts that we are surrounded with and are right in front of us that we take for granted. And in sharing her story, it was the power of story. And including us, we were prophesying our own closures,
Mm.
right? And so there's a lot about the aging journey. I think that there's elements of closure, whether it's athletics or
Right.
saying goodbye to some of our friends, or, there's these elements of, and who knows some of us may lose our capacity more than just names
Right.
and order, but it's and she said we had to give him a drug to calm him because there's this actual physical state called something agitation.
Mhm.
And and so the combination of all that, those
Mhm.
last 4 nights, and and it was honest and it was
So,
real.
which, years ago when my wife and I were taking a little training in potentially becoming counselors, I remember the person training us said, when people cry, um, you don't have to stop. Uh,
Mm.
people can learn how to talk through their tears. So just encourage people to cry and keep talking, which seems counterintuitive at times. But one of the things I love about you is your vulnerability and the emotion you bring and your ability to keep telling what's going on and not ending the story, with the tears around which everybody would surround you as well. But and I'm delighted that people got to hear that story. But I do want to, very delighted, in fact, and I'm sure it's going to touch a lot of people. But it raises the issue of dying itself, how we feel about dying. And I find myself thinking more about this because I'm older. And it's kind of, I call it my next life experience, next date,
Yeah.
the thing. I mean, so it's not morose, but I just find myself being conscious of it. And it makes the idea of what happens much more concrete rather than theoretical, wherein we're 20s or 30s, like, oh, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. Like, I got this,
Sure.
in our age space. And now it's like, is that going to happen? And so talk about uh, this will be a clumsy question that you'll fix. Talk about, what's next for you relate, how you think about dying now at this age, how you think about it, maybe versus what you did earlier, and maybe what you're looking forward to.
Mm. That's a great question, Jim. I think there are people who are waiting to die and people who are choosing to live, choosing to live. I've learned that from my friends on death row. They said you can either come and wait to die or choose to live, because death row is sort of
Mm.
you're looking at it all the time, and I like getting older. There's a, there are challenges and are things like that. And I'm sure for people who have given themselves to things and not to relationships, they're going to have a rough process unless people who become gifts to them show up. I'm surrounded. I'm surrounded. And my life is so much more full of gratitude now than it's ever been. I'm so grateful. And I'm not afraid to die. I'm not. And my faith has so much to do with that. I I'm very comfortable with the reality that I'm going to jump the twig, as they say in the UK, you know. And I'm not afraid of it. I'm not waiting to die. And for me, it's about what is actually in front of me. What's the real world? Death is death is a it's not even a thing. For me, it's a step through. And I don't think I actually die. I think my body gives up as it should at some point. And so I like the mystery of what lies behind. I'm not afraid of it because if there isn't a higher power, a God who is good, love, who if there isn't a personal lover out there, then none of us have any hope anyway. So I've just found that living well, being kind, being a forgiving person, being a truth teller is so much a richer way to live than being afraid. And I'm not afraid. And I also am convinced about the centrality of the nature and character of God as
Right.
love.
Hmm.
So in terms of looking forward, I know my pace will slow down. And that's a good thing. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not running towards some goal like relevance or trying to maintain some status like notoriety. None of that matters to me. Those things all have become games to me. And if I can play the game in such a way that it is helpful to others, so be it. Because it is unrighteous wealth. And and I love that game. And I don't play games with people's hearts or lives, but with status and things and the way systems work and validate people and you
Right.
know
Right.
it's it's how do we be in this world and not of it?
Right.
That's it for me.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot about aging that I like. There's a gentleness and a quiet to it and an ease. And I'm watching the kids uh, growing up and stepping up and beginning to take, I'm seeing my relationship changing as becoming more childlike
Mm-hmm.
as theirs becomes more adult-like.
Hmm.
And, and I really love it. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't offend me. I'm not grasping onto power and control in my personal relationships. I'm actually engaged in breathing as much grace into those who are most precious to me in
Hmm.
a way that allows them to flourish.
Right.
That
Yeah.
as a younger person, I did not know even was a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you for uh, talking about things that I think are unusual for people to talk about. Uh, and I'm really appreciate, of course, being able to talk about things, but I mostly appreciate uh, about the your friendship and your care and your responsiveness and uh, your genuineness. When you mentioned being honest and all of that, this is clearly has an impact on people when because of its absence, right? It's the power of
Yeah.
negative space.
Sadly.
It just isn't
Yeah.
happening. Like there it is.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, and I appreciate being with you today.
And I love you. I'm so grateful that you're my friend and your your capacity for inquiry and curiosity, elevating curiosity to the front row, I think is an incredible gift, not only for me, but for the cosmos itself. And you are such a good man, Jim. And
Thank you.
I'm proud to know you.
Thank you. Okay. Boom. We're done with that segment. That was beautiful, dude.